As you can see, there's some nice grease right around the teeth, but it's not actually in the teeth. It's because a lot of the reel is going to have friction up against these areas right here. What is going on, everybody? Ryan Rigged here, once again taking over the KastKing channel, and today I'm going to be showing you some basic and maybe a little bit more advanced maintenance to keep your spin reels running smoothly year long. Now, the reel in front of me that I'm going to be doing my maintenance on is a KastKing Zephyr 3000 series. This reel is not too old, so the maintenance is not going to be too in-depth, but I did want to go over just the scope of the maintenance and kind of give you guys a better general idea of what you need to do to keep your reels running nice and smoothly year long. Without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the tools and the items that you're going to need to do your spin reel maintenance today. Now, some of the items I'm going to show you today are not necessary to complete your maintenance, but there are a few tools that you will need. The first tool you're going to need that I would recommend you use is a crescent wrench compared to a pair of pliers, just so that way you don't strip any of the screws, bolts, or nuts that you're going to be gripping onto and cause any damage to the reel internally. On top of that, you're going to want a little screwdriver set, or at least a small Phillips and a small flathead screwdriver, so that way you can kind of get into the smaller screws and bolts into this reel without, once again, damaging any of the components and causing internal issues to your spin reel. Now, some of the items that I use personally that you might not need are a pair of tweezers. It's just something I use to help me get some of the snap rings or O-rings, some of the finer little details out of there you'll see later on. On top of that, I use a little poker. You can just use the tweezers. You don't need anything like this, but sometimes I use this to pop the bearings in and out, which we won't be doing today because we won't necessarily be needing to change out any bearings. On top of that, as far as cleaning stuff, I use Q-tips and napkins for most of my cleaning. There will be grease and oil, grime, sometimes pieces of grass from the reeds and stuff that you're fishing. So basically, it's kind of user preference. I would say stick to something that is going to be either microfiber or cotton, and something that's not going to really deteriorate too hard when you get it wet with oil or grease. Last but not least, and probably one of the most important things that you're going to want to use, is your breakdown chart that comes in every KastKing box. Now, once again, we're going to be using the KastKing Zephyr spin reel today, and that's what we got in front of us. It is the breakdown and schematic chart for the KastKing Zephyr. Right here in front of us, we have a breakdown of every part, every component, and basically the assembly process of this reel. So if we forget, or we might have something left over, we know exactly where it goes and how to put it back together. On top of that, we have some just basic greases and oils that I like to use to do my maintenance. Now, as far as grease and oil goes, you can just get on Google and type in reel grease and have something come up real simple like this. I believe it's called reel butter, or you can go into something a little bit more advanced. I know that there's tons of brands. I'm not going to tell you which one to use in specific. The only thing I will tell you to do is not use WD-40. It is a water-based lubricant, and it is not meant for the internal components of a gearbox, which is essentially what is inside of a reel. Alright, so now that you got a general idea of everything that we basically need to get started on this maintenance for today, let's go ahead, bust this bad boy open, and see exactly what you need to do as far as beginner processes go, and then we'll go ahead and do a little bit more in-depth look and get into the internals, into the worm gear, and all that fun stuff. But let's go and jump into it. Alright, so we're just going to go ahead and start by opening up this drag completely. It's pretty simple to get these spin reels open compared to bait casters, but the internal components can be a little bit more confusing. So if you're weary of doing maintenance, it can be a little scary, but realistically, like I said, if you have your chart and the right tools and the right mentality, you can get this done pretty easy and keep these reels running very, very long.
6.5 hours later.
So after about 20 minutes of twisting this bad boy, you'll get to a point where it starts to kind of wobble. If it doesn't want to come straight off, you can just grab your little spool, pull straight up, and you can see it comes right off. Now, I'm just going to talk a little bit more about what's inside this reel so you can get a better idea. Right here, this is going to be your compression set for your drag. Internally, there is a bearing right here, and if you're just looking to do some basic maintenance, the bearing is something you want to just hit with some oil real quick, 1 or 2 little drops, right along the outer seal will be all you need to keep that bearing running smoothly. Now if you look, there's a little bit of grease on top of this reel, which is something you want to make sure you have. That just makes it so that way when we do have it nice and tight, the drag pushed all the way down, it still allows the spool to move freely without causing any damage on the actual rubber seal. Now if we were going to take this thing completely apart, we would just grab our tweezers, hit this split ring, pull it out, and disassemble this little drag system. But like I said, this reel has not been used too much, and it's something that's probably going to be a little bit more of the advanced maintenance, which is what I'm going to stay away from right now. So I'm going to pop those two pieces to the side, and the next thing we see is our little drag tension, little clicking mechanism. This is basically what puts the tension up against the internals of your drag, creates that clicking sound, and it stops the spool from spinning freely and keeps that fish hopefully secure on that hook. So this next little portion, you just gonna kind of pull it straight up. As you can see, we got ourselves like a little washer that just sits at the bottom. We got our little spring plate, and then we got our little bushing on top. I'm gonna put that in the first little area, and then we got our first little set of components that we need to disassemble. So I'm gonna grab a screwdriver. Now there's a ton of parts on this reel, so we might have to fast forward through some of it, but you will get the general idea of what we need to do to break this thing down and what you want to do to keep this thing running smoothly once again. One more thing I like to do while I'm disassembling my reels, you'll notice, is I like to lay my parts out freely right in front of me, so that way I know exactly how they go back on my reel in case I want to get it back together pretty quickly. So now we got our little spool, little clasp, little portion of the reel taken off, and we're getting towards the internals. Now at this point in time, we've gotten to the portion of the reel where you want to just do your basic maintenance. If you are not comfortable with getting into the internals of the reel, once again, this is the part where you're just going to stop, and basically what we're going to do is disassemble now the handle. Disassemble that handle, and if you look right here, we will have a bearing on top, we will have a bearing to the side over here, and another bearing to the side over here. Now if you're looking just to complete basic reel maintenance, this is the point in time where you just want to pull out your oil and completely lubricate your bearings on both sides and your bearing on top. If you're having any sort of issues with the grinding or griming and the reel actually not pivoting right here in this arm, you can add oil down the little flat portion of this brass piece and it'll get into the gearbox. One thing I will say, guys, if you're going to do that, use very little oil because oil has a tendency to break down grease and remove it from your gears. But with that being said, if your gears are seizing up because your grease is old and grimy, but you're not comfortable with opening up the internals, adding just a little bit of oil, 1 to 2 drops, can kind of rejuvenate the oil, bring it back to life, and unfreeze any parts that are internally stuck, and it stops you from having to open it up and scare yourself and screw anything up in the long run. So this would be the point in time when you're just done with your basic maintenance. You're going to go ahead and slap your spool back on. You're going to go ahead and reassemble everything, put it back together, rotate your reel a few times, get it running nice and smoothly, get that oil and that grease running nice and smoothly, all those bearings moving, and you'll see there's a big difference, a lot less friction when you have lubrication breaking down that dirt and all that stuff inside of your bearings, inside of your gears, and keeping your stuff running nice and smooth, like I said. Now, if you're having even harder issues with your reel, if it's grimy and it's sticking, it's just not feeling good, it's not rotating good, this is where we're going to have to go a little bit further in depth in the reel. We're going to have to open up the components on the inside. We're probably going to have to change out the grease, see if there's any broken parts, and just check the maintenance of this reel basically internally. First thing we're going to do is just open up the top little portion of this reel and get to the undercover so we can get the side of the gearbox open and take a look at this bad boy. There we go. There's our 3, there's our box. I'm gonna put my screws over here, lay them out so they're in a row and out of my way. Now right here we have kind of a cover cap. Now this is something that I personally like to leave on my reels because it has a spring right here. I try to stay away from anything that is spring loaded because it tends to shoot out, fly out, and it's sometimes hard to recover. If you're trying to replace or fix the springs, it's a little different, but if you're not, what you're going to want to do is exactly what I'm doing right now, is just put that cover plate right back down, and we're just going to put a screw without that top little cup on just to keep that area covered nice and easy, and that spring can't move or anything like that. So that's what's going to help us keep that spring box covered, and at the same time allow us to access this screw right here, which is the final screw that you would need if we were disassembling this reel from these outer areas. Alright, so we got the screws removed. Now we can just grab this little corner of the spool right here, and hopefully, I believe that's all we're going to need, just to pull forward on that little plastic cap. There we go. Now we've got to the interior portion of the reel. As you can see, like I said, this reel is fairly new, so that it looks pretty greased up. It actually looks very, very nicely greased up. Probably will not have to re-grease it at all. But this is the portion where you're going to need the tweezers. If you do want to use your tweezers or something else, you're just going to pull this little pin out right here. It looks like there's a plastic guard. Yeah, that just comes right out on this, once again, KastKing Zephyr reel. Every little spin reel is going to be a little bit different. So once again, remember, KastKing Zephyr reel, that's what we're doing today. But you pull this little bottom pin out right here. Once we remove that pin, we'll pop it right over here because I do not want to lose that. Now we're just going to remove this gear real quick to rotate that down, and there you go. That's going to be one of our gears right there. As you can see, it is still fairly well greased, and this is going to give you a good general idea of actually what you want to do and how you want to grease your reels, actually, because as you can see, there's some nice grease right around the teeth, but it's not actually in the teeth. It's because a lot of the reel is going to have friction up against these areas right here. So what they wanted to make sure that they do is they put, grease around the pinions and around the internal little, teeth of the gears that are going to be riding on this gear on the inside, and that are going to be rubbing up against the little shaft right here that rides up and down this worm gear. So you have a few different gears and components inside your reel. I'm not too familiar with all the names of them, but I will say if you want to remove this gear right here, you want to make sure that this portion, this little shaft right here, is rotated all the way down. If this is not rotated down, it's going to be holding up this portion of the gear and not allow you to actually pull it off. So now that we got the gearbox open on this reel, this is basically as far as you need to go to do your in-depth maintenance. As you can see, there's grease on the bottom portion of this gear, there's grease on the worm gear, there's grease on the shaft, there's grease on the internal of this gear, and that's basically what you want to do when you get in here. You're going to be greasing your parts, you're going to be cleaning your reel. You can kind of clean everything you need to clean from in here. If you want to actually get into the internal portions, there's a screw right there that you can remove. Once you remove that screw, you can slowly start to move and rotate this little L piece. Once you rotate this piece, it comes out, and then you can slowly start to disassemble it once again per the chart. You really shouldn't have to do too much disassembling like that unless you have any sort of dirt or grime that you can visually see up inside the gears, because if you can't see it, it's probably not going to be there, honestly, or unless you need to replace something. So with that being said, we're basically at the end of our maintenance for our spin reels. You just re-grease this portion, get it nice and clean, and then we reassemble it, get out there and start testing it. So I'm going to slowly get this bad boy put back together, and we'll talk more about it at the end. And there you go, guys, reassembled and ready to go, good as new. That is going to be exactly what you want to do to take apart this reel, do some basic maintenance or some more advanced maintenance, or replace some parts. Once again, guys, all this stuff you can pick up as far as the grease and oil just online. Tools that you're going to want, some crescent wrenches, some screwdrivers, tweezers, something, make it easier to grab those little pieces. And now that you got your reel back together, it's just about, rotating that gearbox and getting everything nice and lubricated again. And on top of that, before we get out there in the water, I will say, double check your drag. Sometimes I've had issues when I get back out there and my drag's completely loose, and I'm wondering what the heck happened. It's because I did my maintenance and I forgot to readjust my spool and readjust my reel back to my liking. With one other thing, saltwater reels, finesse reels, some of those things can be a little bit more different, just because the components have to, withstand different elements. Saltwater has the salt element, so they use different stuff. Sometimes they use felt instead of rubber. Sometimes they use carbon fiber instead of rubber. So there's different things, different components that you'll see inside the drag systems, and that all varies depending on the reel type. But that is gonna be it for today, guys. Thank you everybody again for watching, and we'll see you all in the next one.